Let's speak to Dr. Rashid Draman. He's Executive Director of the African Center for Parliamentary Affairs. We'll get his thoughts on, on these reforms that Parliament wants to enact to see how it will lead to the benefit of its own operations. Dr. Draman, good morning, and many thanks for joining us on the Citi Breakfast Show.
Good morning.
Great. Your initial thoughts on these reforms that Parliament wants to put in place? It's looking at some of its committees. It wants to realign some of them. And, what do you make of this step taken by the August House of Parliament?
Well, let me say this has been, very, very long overdue. The reforms, the kind of review of the standing orders started more than 10 years ago. Parliament after Parliament tried, and then, I don't know, sometimes not able to wield enough political capital, the initiative dies even after a lot of investments, because I remember our center invested a lot of money. Ghana did same. Before then, I remember CDD and so on. So first, I must commend the leadership of Parliament for making sure that this time around, at least, this thing is coming to fruition. We have come a long way. Since the 30 years of parliamentary democracy. The world of parliaments, the world of democracy has evolved significantly. But our country, we have been static in terms of, the rules and procedures that we use to govern our parliamentary proceedings. And they are called standing orders because of their dynamic nature. So in every country, every now and then, the orders are reviewed just to take into account the realities and so on and so forth. So, in terms of these reforms, I strongly believe that they will go a very long way in enhancing our democracy. The committees, first of all, are going to be reduced in size, which I think is a very good thing, because best practice tells us that when a committee is too big, it becomes a little bit unwieldy, and we expect most parliamentary committees to work on the basis of consensus, so that they will argue and discuss on the basis of their technical competence. But you come to our country, some parliamentary committees are close to 31 and so on. You go to the UK, for instance, their parliament, the size of the parliament is almost maybe 3 times the size of our parliament. You take their public accounts committee, for instance, it's less than 20 members. You come to our space, our public accounts committee is about 25 members. So is the appointments committee and so on. So I think that's the first kind of good thing. The second is the fact that, a number of committees, almost all committees in our parliament are chaired by the ruling party except the Public Accounts Committee. And when we talk about our democracy here and we assess parliamentary committees, the one that comes to everybody's mind in terms of performance is the Public Accounts Committee, and it's mainly because it's chaired by the opposition. So we had the likes of Honorable Kandapa, Honorable Salas Mensah, and so on, and now Honorable Abreji chairing the Public Accounts Committee. So we have been calling over the years for, most of these oversight committees to be given to the parties that are not in power, because oversight, even though the responsibility of an entire parliament, practically we've seen in different parliaments, including our own, that when it comes to holding the government to account, it becomes a business of the opposition. So that is why if you have the opposition chairing some of these oversight committees, it becomes a very good thing. In the East African countries of Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, and so on, most oversight committees are chaired by the opposition. So that's why I find this initiative a laudable one. Then we also have the budget committee. Previously every matter, budget and so on, finance is just handled by the finance committee. And in some countries, this is not the case. They have what is called the Parliamentary Budget Office and a budget committee, which deals specifically with issues of budget. And then the rest of finance issues are dealt with the finance committee. So I've seen, in these new reforms, some kind of decentralization of the financial matters of our republic. Because there are, I think, apart from the budget committee, there are other committees that would deal with finance besides the finance committee, which is a good thing. The other thing is we've seen also the introduction of a day or an hour or hours for backbenchers. Because, if you remember, most people complain, we send people to parliament, we never hear their voices and so on and so forth.
Yes.
And most of these are backbenchers. Usually, the opportunity is given to the leadership to make statements and so on. And sometimes, those who are sitting at the back, they never get the opportunity, even if they want to. So I think there is an introduction of that. Then we also have the kind of private members' bills, which started during the 7th Parliament under Right Honorable Michael Quay.
Okay.
Now I think the frontiers are going to be expanded so that at least we can get more private members' bills and so on and so forth. And then we also have, the introduction of a committee on post-legislative scrutiny, which means that, the laws that have been passed in this country, every now and then the committee will look at these laws and see whether they are really responding to the gaps that they were supposed to fill. In most countries these days, these are done so that if the law is not really, up to date or a lot has happened, then those revisions are made. So I think all in all, the reforms are quite far-reaching, and I believe they would enhance, our democratic practice. And then one thing that I forgot is the fact that now I think most governance institutions in our country are going to have to come before Parliament, at least to account for their stewardship, even if it is just maybe accounting for how they use resources that were appropriated to them by Parliament.
Okay.
It's only government ministers who show up before, and we know the tussle, for instance, in this country when Parliament wants even the EC, for instance, to come before it to answer certain questions. It's not in their standing orders. But now I think they want to make sure that there is some clarity and there are some kind of procedures and structures in place to make sure that all these things happen. We would have loved to see, a lot of the oversight committees, just beyond the appointments committee chaired by the opposition. But if you read the reforms, I think some of those committees are now left to the discretion of Parliament to apportion on the basis of numerical strength in the House, which is, I think one limitation that I have seen. The second one is the fact that, I took part in some of the kind of work that came up to this point.
Okay.
And one of the suggestions that I made was for our Parliament to, in the new standing orders, to have what is called the Committee of the Future.
The Committee of the Future.
Yes, indeed.
Okay.
Because in some parliaments we have that. So, for instance, in the Parliament of Finland, we used to go to Finland every year. We had a collaboration with the Parliament, and I have gone there with many, many MPs from our country, including, people like Honorable Kandapa and others. We've had programs there, just to learn, to see how a small country like that, has managed, to achieve the level of development that it has. And one of the committees that, they have, which is amazing, is a committee of the future, where, MPs just sit down and imagine, scenarios about their country and try to see how do we reposition our country, in order to respond to some of these things. So they usually are able to, prepare themselves and get a lot of shock absorbers, so that when some of these unforeseen things happen, at least their country is not found in a very deep hole. That didn't make it to these proposed new standing orders. And then is it Nathan, right?
Yes, Nathan here.
So Nathan, if you remember, on the after the state parliament was inaugurated,
Mm-hmm.
we had a challenge because the standing orders, for instance, were not made for hung parliament. We never imagined. So that's why, for instance, I'm talking about this committee of the future.
Okay.
We never imagined that we wake up one day and we have a divided parliament, and then we don't know who is majority, who is minority. The speaker had to make a ruling. So I was hoping that in these new standing orders, at least some of these matters will be clarified, including even imagining that someday we might wake up and have in the parliament not only the NDC and the MPP, but another maybe third party that is numerically strong as the two parties. We saw that happen in Sierra Leone in the last parliament before this year election. They woke up, their standing orders are limited because they didn't know how to deal with all these other parties that now have presence and strength in parliament. So I was hoping that some of these things would have found their way in the standing orders, even if we are not there yet, but to just imagine a day when we wake up and then we have all these things. But all in all, I think very good reforms, and I must commend them for taking the bold initiative and this time making this happen.
All right, Doc. Thank you. Thank you so much for your time. That was Dr. Rashid Rahman, Executive Director of the Africa Center for Parliamentary Affairs.